Hi, and welcome back to Shane Plays. This is part of my review series of the new Age of Heroes from DC Comics that's spinning out of their Dark Knight's Metal event from a few months back. And as we've talked about in this video series, some of the uh, these new series, have a direct connection to Metal. Some don't seem to have any connection at all. Maybe it'll be explained later, or maybe not at all. I don't know. This is another one of these that doesn't seem super connected to Metal. And speaking of connections, or the lack thereof, this Brimstone in DC's New Age of Heroes has no connection that I can tell to the Brimstone that first premiered in 1986, and Legends #1 has been part of the DC universe since then. That Brimstone was created by Darkseid, in one of his many schemes to take over Earth and get rid of the superheroes. And I think another piece of trivia there, the Suicide Squad, the modern Suicide Squad, Task Force X, I believe their first mission was to take Brimstone down during Legends, if I remember correctly. So, but anyway, that big lumbering beast of a supervillain, best I can tell, has no connection, unless I guess somehow this ends up being some plot of Apocalypse and Darkseid. But I doubt that. But stranger things have happened. It touches on something that I've mentioned in these videos previously. A lot of the names in the New Age of Heroes are being reused from previous DC characters. And I read, I wish I could remember who it was, one of the creators, said, hey, we got all these names, let's use them. And it's also just, kind of lifting the veil and looking at the business side of comic books. It's expensive to, protect a name and to go through all the legal stuff to, have that name exclusively for your company. So it's cheaper also to just use an existing name and do something new with it rather than trying to come up with something new. Not to mention it's, hard to come up with a cool name. Not impossible, but a lot of the good ones are already being used. And this is came out a few weeks ago. I've got this one and two more #1s to review, but all of the #1s from the New Age of Heroes are now out. I've gotten a little bit behind due to various things, but I am committed to at least doing a kind of an initial first look / review at each of the #1s. And for the most part, I've enjoyed the New Age of Heroes quite a bit. Maybe I'll do a sum up video at the very end, kind of saying, now that a few issues are out, which ones do I like the best, which ones do I not, which am I keeping up with, etc. And I have to say, just right off the bat, I don't know if Brimstone's going to be one of the ones that I keep up with. So, that's just straight up. I think I've read 2 or 3 issues of it now, and I'm just not that excited. It's okay. I had expected basically a Ghost Rider ripoff, pardon me, inspired by Ghost Rider. And so far that hasn't really been the case. There is uh, the main character sort of makes a deal to save his town, and then is get transformed into Brimstone. But if I remember right, the original Ghost Rider stuff, like Johnny Blaze, I think knew that he was getting into a deal with the devil, if I remember right. I'd have to go look that up. So like the other New Age of Heroes first issues, the cover is actually a trifold cover so that you get a larger picture. So let's take a look at that here, give you a nice look at that. So there's some, as with the other trifold covers, looks like you get some of the supporting cast, get a nice shot of the main character, and then some other scene. That kind of looks like, that right there kind of looks like Brimstone's, I guess, chest, kind of. I don't know what that is. It's somebody laying on their back with a kind of a mask on with light erupting out of them. So and their hands going up. I think maybe that's the agent. I guess I don't know if he's the devil or a agent of the devil or some nefarious supernatural entity, but I think that's the guy that makes the deal with the main character. And this back part of the trifold is, of course, part of this big mural kind of montage of all of the New Age of DC heroes, or New Age of Heroes, DC's New Age of Heroes, New Age of DC heroes. I've seen it said both ways by DC themselves. That all of the characters. Now there's the opening shot right there, and it just opens up and it says, "Everything burns. It was supposed to be different. This was supposed to save me, save my town, but it all ends the same way. Everything burns." All right, and then we have a flashback to earlier that day, and our main character is in a small town that's dying. He can't get a job. He can't get money to keep up his car, so his car's always dying. So he's kind of, as he says it, he's in a trap. He can't better himself. But there was York Hills is the name of the town, and it was, I guess, a prosperous town, or at least not a dying town when there was coal. But then the coal left, and then factories came, and then factories left, and then nothing came. So this is, your small town in America that's dying, but there's some people that are still there because they want to be, and some people because they're trapped, basically, or at least they think they are. So this guy's name is Joe. He starts off having a very bad day, goes to the diner where his sister works, who's, of course, going to college, right? And she's working and going to college. I think she's like a waitress and all this, and wanting to help her brother, and she's the plucky sister. And then you find out later that their father is out of work and has been hurt on the job, and is out of work and is on disability, and but I guess he spends his money unwisely and things like that. So there's tension, in not only in the town but in the family. And Joe, for whatever reason, wants to say, he doesn't want to just leave the town. He would like to save the town. I guess he feels connected to it, that sort of thing. So of course, one night, or I believe that night, while he's, out driving around, his truck breaks down, and while his truck breaks down, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to freeze to death." But then a car comes up, right, and offers him a ride, which of course kicks off the sequence where he meets somebody who's going to say, "Hey, my job is to travel to towns like this and look for ways to save them. And would you like to save your family and your sister and all of that?" And you can guess what happens next. A deal is struck, but I will say that Joe, and this is interesting. One thing I want to point out, I don't know if you can see that, he's got like a Superman shirt on. I don't know if that's ironic, like he would like to be the Superman of his town, and now he's basically going to be put into a situation where he could easily be the villain. Yeah, that's right. I forget. So the main guy, that's the slick salesman offering the job, he does get that sort of mask appears on him. So that's who that is. And of course, Joe is transformed into Brimstone. He's like, "What?" So a couple of things to point out here. One, it appears that the agent of the home office has the ability, when he's changing people, and it's implied, if not stated outright, that this isn't the first time he's done this. They look for small towns, and they basically trick somebody into making this bargain, and then he transforms them into some sort of supernatural creature that then destroys the town at the same time that it's changing it into something more suitable for the home office. And in later issues, it does show that they find evidence in news reports once they put everything together, like, oh, this is happening around different places. But my point that I was going to make, so I'll go back to, is that this agent, this sales guy, has the ability to, when he transforms somebody, I guess, some leeway in how he transforms them. So he's like, oh, well, Cole used to be here, so I'm going to give you sort of a fiery, brimstone kind of thing. There's another character that he calls his Hound that is introduced briefly in this series that freezes a police officer, and they do show up in later issues, and they're like Brimstone, but they're more like ice based or cold based. So there's kind of some interesting stuff coming together here. It always, the sales guy, the demon, the bad guy. He even alludes to the fact. He says at one point, he says, I've made a few of these deals now. No one has ever really asked about the hows and whys before saying yes. And that's kind of on this montage is as Joe is being transformed. And I'm like, the whole time I'm reading this, I'm like, ask what's involved, and I guess they're going with willing suspension of disbelief, from the writer's perspective, et cetera, um, to get the story moving forward. But I guess maybe you're so desperate, and he's at the end of his rope, and he's desperate, and he's upset, and he's worried about his sister and his mother and the whole town. So he's like, yes, any thread of anything that is offered my way, I'll grasp at. But this is how the issue ends. So one thing I was a little disappointed in uh, is we don't really see what Brimstone can do or is all about until the second issue. And that's just kind of a nature of how comic writing has changed in storytelling. Used to, this would have been like the first three panel or the first three pages. The whole comic book, the old 20 pages or whatever. I think 20 pages, and DC's talking about they're going to go back up to 22 pages and keep their prices $3.99. Anyway, I just read that recently. But that would have been like first two or three pages maybe, and then after that, like Brimstone would have gone on a rampage and all of this, and but now we've got to kind of draw it out, and it's interesting, but it's more like cinematic storytelling. I don't want to watch a movie. I'm reading a comic book, right? I'd rather have gotten a little further into the story to see, is this something that I want to keep up with? Which maybe that's what they're counting on. They didn't give me enough to decide, so I've got to read at least one more issue. Let's see if I can. It's been a while since I've read this, so let me see if I can find this guy's name. Um, yeah, I'm not sure that he ever actually the salesman. Um, he said, yeah. Joe at one point asked him, "Are you a salesman?" He says, "I'd like to think that I am the salesman." So again, not coming out and saying that he's the devil or Mephistopheles or even a supernatural entity from Christian theology, um, but he represents something bad, and that becomes more and more apparent, as the issues unfold. So, stuff I liked about this is I did like the art. It seems fitting for this is basically so far more of a horror story than a superhero story. So it's got kind of a gritty. It almost reminds me of old like Constantine, some of the old kind of Constantine stuff. I can't give you a specific time period or reference, but it's just that kind of gritty. At times, Constantine and other kind of supernatural comics have kind of gone for that feel. Um, anyway, like I said, it's pretty good for what it is. It is not uh, something that so far is grabbing me. And by the way, I meant the art is pretty good for what it is. The overall Brimstone series so far, again, and after two or three issues, I'm not sure where it's going, what it's trying to tell me. Uh, there hasn't been that sort of Ghost Rider. I'm going to rebel against the devil. Kind of maybe they're working up to that. Although he's kind of horrified by what he does. So maybe that's the way they're going with it. But how this fits into the overall DC universe, or how Brimstone is a hero, is very much beyond me at this point. Let's look at the storytellers here. We've got, and this was The Curse of Brimstone Inferno Part 1 by Philip Tan and Justin Jordan. The storytellers, remember with this New Age of Heroes thing, DC is, taking the emphasis off the writer and, making sure the artists get pumped. So instead of saying writer and artist, they're saying storytellers, and they're just lumping them together. But Philip Tan was the artist, Justin Jordan was the writer. So this is interesting. It says Justin Jordan dialogue. And if I remember right, I don't know if DC's entire creative process for all of their books has gone over to this, but I think for Age of Heroes in particular, and maybe others, they've kind of gone to what used to be the Marvel way of making comics, which was the writer would plot things out, and then the writer or the artist would go draw everything based on the script or the outline or whatever, and then the writer would come back and assign dialogue and that, and it was this sort of interesting process of making comics that worked for Marvel for a long time, but they've gotten away from it. Now DC's kind of going towards that. And then it says Rain Barretto is the colorist, and I would say that especially for a book like this, the colorist is really important. All colorists are important in all comic books, that are color, I suppose. Even a black and white comic, I guess the colorist is important because of the shades of gray, but maybe that's the penciler or the inker, I don't know. But the way you use color in a comic book is incredibly important, and especially for a book like this where they're really trying to strike like an atmospheric feel, with what the town feels like and just kind of the mood. So good job there. Rain, very good job. And this has got Wes Abbott's letterer, Brian Cunningham, group editor, Jessica Chin, editor, Brimstone created by Justin Jordan and Philip Tan. So this is next, Burn Wounds, and then at the end of it, you get a little teaser for new challengers. I just don't know if I'm going to stay with it. I'll probably give it, I don't know, I may go ahead and drop it, because like I said, I've read 2 or 3 issues, and it's not terrible, but I mean, I've got plenty I'm reading right now, and to get me to add something to my ongoing reserve and pull list and all that is, these days you've really got to knock me over or do something new or to be a character that I really love or something like that, to get me to come along for the ride permanently or at least ongoing for a while. And so far this one just hasn't been doing it. So maybe Curse of Brimstone will be cursed not to move forward. Maybe other people like it. I don't know. I haven't really seen a lot of the sales numbers off of the New Age of Heroes yet, so I honestly don't know how each of them are doing. I hope some of them move forward at least, because for the most part they're pretty good, and they feel kind of fresh. And anyway, there you go. That's Brimstone. Your mileage may vary, but I give it a 5 out of 6 out of 10. Not terrible, but just not grabbing me. But I'm not going to curse about it.